Welcome to Season 2, Episode 10 of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. I'm your host, Angela Watson, and I'm here to speak life, encouragement, and truth into the minds and hearts of educators and get you energized for the week ahead. Today, I'm going to share some thoughts on extreme student behavior and 7 traps to avoid when it seems like you've tried it all, but nothing works. Visit truthforteachers.com to read the blog post, get links to recommended resources, and to share your thoughts on the show. So I got an Ask Angela Anything question from a teacher named Carrie, who wrote, "What do you do for that student that continually chooses to misbehave? We've tried everything, but nothing phases him. And it's sending a message to the other students in my class that I have a different standard of behavior for him. I feel like I argue and nag all day, and that isn't the type of teacher I usually am." First off, don't take the behavior personally. There's a kid like this in almost every classroom. Unless the student only misbehaves in your classroom, only misbehaves with you, the problem is probably not with you. Don't take it personally. Don't feel like you are the cause of this child's issues. The way that you choose to interact with this child certainly impacts him and influences his behavior, but you can't control him. Remind yourself, I am not responsible for any choices but my own. I am not responsible for the root of his issues, and I refuse to blame myself for them. I will not waste my time and energy trying to control another person. I will focus on my actions and reactions and being the type of teacher that I want to be. You see, that last statement that Carrie made where she said, I feel like I argue and nag him all day long and that isn't the type of teacher I usually am. This is the feeling that tends to be our undoing as teachers. We allow kids with extreme behavioral or socio-emotional issues to turn us into people that we don't want to be. We watch ourselves become the type of teacher who screams at a student, who shames them, who punishes them out of desperation and frustration. We hate the person who we've become, and we blame the child for making us that way. But we're responsible for our own choices. No one can make us think or feel in a way that we don't want to. We can choose to love kids when they act in unloving ways. We can make a conscious choice to act from a place of love, even when students don't. Don't let students bait you into reacting. Remind yourself that the kids who need love the most will often ask for it in the most unloving ways. Use that thought to stir up the patience you need to respond to misbehavior in constructive ways. That way you're not just stopping the behavior, but you're proactively preventing it from happening again by meeting kids' underlying needs. Most of the time, you can catch more flies with honey. If you aim to be a calm, empathetic, and unshakable role model for your students, you will get better results than if you teach kids to fear you or fear punishment from you. Fear is a really strong and effective motivator in the short term, but it doesn't produce the results we want long term. So don't make tough love your default reaction. Work on being the mature adult in the midst of these tense, emotionally charged situations instead of letting kids bait you into reacting to them. A third trap to avoid is don't be quick to assume that you've really tried everything. When you have students that are unresponsive to any type of intervention, the most important thing is to be consistent, calm, and give the strategies some time to work. Everyone thinks that they do this, but most of the time, we really aren't doing that at all. I remember one time sitting in a child study meeting, and I was just fighting back tears and feeling like I wanted to scream because this one student was so disruptive in my classroom, I literally could not teach for 2 minutes without an interruption. And I was trying desperately to get this kid evaluated and get him some help. And I was so angry that no one was doing anything. And my entire class's education was suffering because of it. It was so unfair to the rest of the kids. And so I'm sitting in this meeting, and the team asks, what interventions have you tried? And I said, oh, I've tried everything. I did this and that and this and that. None of it worked. See, look, here's the data. I can prove it. And I gleefully laid out all of this documentation that I had resentfully spent so many hours recording. That was my moment of triumph. I was sure that I had conclusively proved that this kid could not function in a general ed classroom. He needed either a one-on-one aid or needed to be moved to a different setting. Can't refute data, right? Finally, I just knew this kid was going to get the help he needed, and I was finally going to be able to teach the rest of the class. And the psychologist looked over all my paperwork, and she studied it very carefully. And then she said to me, this is very impressive, Angela. You've certainly tried a lot of different strategies, and they're very good. I'm wondering how you were able to implement all of this, since it's only the end of September. And I froze as the reality of what she said hit me, because every minute that I spent with that child felt like an eternity. And every minute of implementing some intervention felt like a week. The amount of stress that I was under had caused me to completely lose perspective and decide that this kid was incapable of growth and improvement after just 6 weeks of trying to work with him. Don't fall into this trap that I did and set yourself up for disappointment by counting on a magic bullet solution. I was a desperate teacher. I was looking for a magic bullet that would cure a lifetime of issues in a child pretty much overnight. I tried a new strategy for a couple days, didn't see an improvement, and so I just adjusted and tried something else. Now, it's good to be constantly monitoring and constantly adapting a set of interventions, but I realized that day in the meeting that you can't just implement a new behavior plan on Monday and decide it didn't work when the kid's still behaving the same way on Friday. Who knows what happened to that kid at home that particular week that could have thrown the results off? And who knows what would happen if you stick with the plan and you keep doggedly going back in that classroom every single day, determined to be patient and loving toward that child. Kids with extreme behaviors tend to have a lot of inconsistency in their lives. And finding out that they have a new behavior plan every week is generally not going to be very helpful. What these kids need more than anything is someone who's willing to stick with them and not show frustration. So avoid the fifth trap and don't wallow in self-pity and assume you are the only one who's overwhelmed. When you're feeling desperate, remember that the child is feeling desperate too. Nobody wants to bang their head on a table. Nobody wants to throw desks. Nobody wants to be ostracized from a room full of people who think they're weird or crazy or scary. Nobody wants to sit alone because they're incapable of getting along with their peers for 30 seconds. Nobody wants to be lectured and nagged and shamed and punished and questioned and disciplined over and over again. If the kid was capable of making better choices that resulted in a better life, a better school experience for him or her, the kid would do it. And we have proof of that because we see those little moments of breakthroughs. We observe as that child is able to be successful for a few minutes during class time. But we think, why can't they be like this all the time? He was able to do it this morning. Why can't he do it now? But those few minutes are the proof that when the child's in a stable emotional state, she or he does choose to work, does choose to interact socially with peers, does choose to be successful. And then when she or he hits a wall or something triggers an issue deep inside, the child isn't able to be successful anymore in that moment. That out of control state might be the default and not the norm, but it's not what the child really wants. Of course, deep down, the child would rather fit in and be part of the group and excel in school and do something great with his or her life. And so our job is to help the child get in that positive mental state more often. And that leads us to the sixth trap to avoid. Don't confuse a problem with a person. When you feel yourself getting really frustrated, remind yourself that the behavior is meeting some need of the child's. Somehow it makes sense within the context of his or her reality. Kids have all kinds of inner struggles that we just don't know anything about as teachers. Try the 2x10 strategy. Google that, 2x10. The top hit is a post that I wrote about it. It's where you talk to the student about anything she or he wants for 2 minutes a day, 10 school days in a row. The goal is to focus not on fixing the kid, but on understanding him or her. Stop worrying about finding the perfect intervention that's going to, fix the problem and create improvements overnight. And start listening. Start empathizing. Start genuinely trying to get to know the student beyond just a problem for you to fix, but as a person for you to learn with and to learn from. The motivational quote for the week ahead that I want to leave you with is from Pam Leo, who said, "You can't teach children to behave better by making them feel worse. When they feel better, they behave better." We have to help our troubled students feel better. And in the process of doing so, we have to make sure that we're avoiding that seventh and final trap. Don't assume that dealing with student misbehavior should be easier for you. I always close the show by telling you it's not going to be easy, it's going to be worth it. And I think that applies to this episode probably more than any other. Everything that I just shared is going to be hard. It is going to require a great deal of self-control and energy. But the more you view the child as a real person, a person that you can get to know and maybe even actually like, the less you will resent having him or her in your classroom. Don't think for a moment that students can't sense our feelings towards them. When you change your attitude, the rest will follow. It's the most important first step. Have a great week. You can do this. Truth for Teachers is a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. For more great podcast recommendations, go to edupodcastnetwork.com. That's edupodcastnetwork.com.